Attention listeners, ahead are spoilers.
Hello and welcome. Let me take that again. Alrighty. Greetings and welcome to the movie house. Oh shit, I fucked that up again. Okay. Alright, here we go.
I think all of this is going to stay in, right?
Yeah, knowing Boris, it's definitely going to stay in. Alright, fuck it. Welcome. You're in the movie trap. This is the movie trap, and I am Russell
dark
Carlson.
Movie trap.
The old dank movie trap. The dank mo. The dank. I am Russell Carlson, and with my chuckling co-hosts, Chris Boris.
Boris Karloff.
And also with me, my other co-host, Zach Powers.
No bets. No bets.
Have a potato. Okay. On the movie trap, we watch 3 movies, and then at the end of the 3 movies, we then vote on an allocated amount of 10 points that we each have a base of to figure out which is the best movie. This is a unique theme because it's our horror movie theme, so nobody really picked the theme other than the random roll of the dice. So the theme this Halloween special is horror movies from before and including 1959. Previously on the movie trap, we watched Boris' first pick, and that was The Curse of the Cat People. And then today we are watching my movie, The Old Dark House, 1932, directed by James Whale. Before we get started into crashing into a late night escapade in the shelter of the storm, let's get a rundown of the points, shall we? Okay, Chris Boris, you have 2 more bonus points to give out with 11 points at final voting. I have 2 more bonus points to give out with 10 points at final voting. And Zach Powers, you have 3 points to give out and 11 points for final voting. I should say that instead of what we normally do in the movie trap, what's going to happen at the end of this horror movie theme is that whoever wins gets to pick a bonus movie with no consequences or hopes of backlash or anything like that. We just have to sit there and take it. Whoever wins it, he could do whatever they want. So that's what we have to look forward to. That is the eyes on the prize, gentlemen. So with that in mind, Zach, why don't you go to start it on The Old Dark House?
The Old Dark House is a 1932 film directed by James Whale, also known for Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, and The Invisible Man. It is based on a 1927 novel called Benighted by J.B. Priestley. It stars Boris Karloff, Charles Lawton, Lillian Bond, and others.
Melvin Douglas, baby.
Melvin Douglas, sure. Regardless, it is a sort of horror comedy, and the basic plot is as such. While vacationing in Wales, a married couple, Margaret and Philip, and their friend Roger Penderell are hit by a heavy storm and unable to continue on their trek through Wales. In dire need of some kind of refuge, they come upon an old house in the countryside and ask if they could stay the night. Once they enter, they meet first a large, mostly silent butler named Morgan, played by Boris Karloff, as well as the proper owners of the house, Horace Femme and his sister, Rebecca. Eventually, Horace and Rebecca, strange as they may be, do agree that they have no choice but to stay the night until it becomes safe for them to travel once again. And Margaret goes with Rebecca to change out of her wet clothes and is berated about how she's lecherous and sinful and all this shit. Rebecca seems to think that everybody in her family is horrible and sinful and evil. including their 102-year-old father, Roderick, who still lives somewhere else in the house. During dinner, two more sort of strays find their way into the house. A man named William Porterhouse and his friend, platonic friend it seems, Gladys DeCane. They join them for dinner and then cigarettes and drinks by the fire, as you did in the 1930s. And Roger and Gladys eventually leave to go to the car to get some whiskey, but end up staying around in the car and kind of getting to know each other a little bit better. Meanwhile, as the lights go out, Philip and Horace are sent to get a lamp from upstairs. Horace is too scared to go upstairs and sends Philip alone. Philip notices a locked door mysteriously upstairs. Meanwhile, Margaret, who has been left alone, is accosted by Morgan, who is now violently drunk. He chases her up the stairs, and eventually Philip, returning with the lamp, manages to knock Morgan out with this gigantic-ass lamp that he has retrieved. So eventually, Roger and Gladys return and discuss with William that maybe Gladys and Roger should live together, William. You're her friend, I guess, so that you're part of this decision.
They woke him up to tell this too, by the way. He slept through the whole fight between he just comes in, see the place of Drek, it's like, ugh, time for a nap.
But it seems like indeed William is just her platonic friend, so he's fine with it.
They're a bunch of libertines.
Yeah. Philip and Margaret have begun to explore the rest of the house and find the old man Roderick Fem, who says that there is another secret resident of the house, Saul, his other child, who is a pure psychopath who wants to burn down the house and kill everybody in it. Morgan, having woken up, has gone upstairs and freed Saul, at which point the Morgan begins to accost Margaret again, drawing away a bunch of the guests, and eventually dragging Morgan into the kitchen. Rebecca hides in her bedroom, and Margaret and Gladys hide in a closet. Saul finally makes his appearance after showing his arm for a little while, and kind of plays with Roger's head about whether he is the insane one or if everybody else in the house is keeping him hostage against his will. But it is soon found out Saul is indeed crazy and knocks Roger out. He attempts to start burning down the house with a log from the fire, but Roger wakes up. They fight. They both fall from the second-story balcony into the main room. Saul is killed, and Roger seems dead for a moment, but as Gladys goes to tend to him, finds he is indeed still alive. So Gladys and William stay the next morning to tend to Roger's injuries while Philip and Margaret go for help. And Roger and Gladys decide they're gonna get married. And that is the end of the old dark house.
Sun is shining, roads are clear,
and
everything worked out.
And the main truth of the story, the main moral, is kill the oldest person in the house so that everything will return to nice and safe, everyday happy vibes.
The oldest person in the house survives. Old Roderick, played by a woman pretending to be a man.
Very true.
Oh wait, so Saul wasn't the oldest one in the house? Because I know when they introduced him as like the creepy...
Saul was the oldest son, I think, or the second oldest son or something.
No.
When they
Saul was the oldest son.
He looks ancient when they pop him up.
The person in the bed is Roderick, and that's the father. And he's bedridden. He's 102.
Gotcha. Okay.
And then Saul is a different character who appears... For the first time you see him for a long time, it's just his arm sticking out from behind.
Right, or a cackle sound cue. You hear this. Yeah. That this movie was definitely not what I expected because I this was a blind pick for me because I had never seen it before. I chose it purely on the pedigree.
Well, we know that you're a huge Titanic fan. You just really wanted to see Gloria Stewart's
Gloria Stewart in yeah, right. No, really, I'm a Charles Lawton fan, really, because if nobody's seen Witness for the Prosecution, you'll know what I'm talking about because that movie's fucking awesome and Lawton's amazing in it. But also Melvin Douglas. You know, I've never seen a movie this early with Melvin Douglas. I'm more familiar with Melvin Douglas's much later day work, 30 years later, with like HUD and Being There and stuff like that. So that's more what. So it was nice to see him in, you know, in his prime, you know, because this all these people in this movie, including Whale, this is one of their earlier films. I mean, this is kind of an early outing for everybody.
Yeah, this would have been, I think, after Frankenstein, but prior to Bride of Frankenstein.
Right.
Or Invisible Man.
Or Invisible Man, too, because this is, after this, Karloff and James Whale never spoke to each other, according to the IMDb page. But yeah, I was sort of a blind pick because James Whale is what, you know, he's the equivalent of Spielberg when it comes to horror movies of this era. I mean, he is Fritz Lang, you know, maybe Thurl Dickinson. These are the heavy hitters of the genre this year. So I thought I can't go wrong with picking this film. Not picking up the comedic themes immediately, but getting the gist of it, that this was meant to be.
I think this movie, it made me laugh pretty early. Like in the first scene, between Philip and Margaret were having this argument and are like so combative, and I thought the dialogue in that scene was actually kind of amusing. And then they like pan back to reveal there's been a guy in the back seat for this entire argument. And that's pretty early in the movie, and it made me laugh. Like the weirdness of the femmes, like the comedy is not generally not overplayed. It's not slapstick. It's just like these weird ass characters, like Rebecca shouting about how everybody's sinful and no one can have a bed, or Horace being like, oh, perhaps you should go alone. I don't want to disturb the upstairs.
Have a potato, you know.
Well, it's just weird because a lot of the comedy comes out of people just playing it totally straight. Like you know, it's funny situations, but the actors don't like wink at the camera ever. There's never like a moment where they're like, we know we're being silly. It's just like, oh no, this is a serious circumstance that we're in. So it always plays kind of odd to me. You guys said this was like, it led to a ton of other movies, which I think is pretty obvious, like the Rocky Horror Picture Show and stuff.
I think that the Rocky Horror Picture Shows and vibes in this are really strong, especially at the beginning. I've looked it up, and definitely it was listed as one of the inspirations by the people who wrote that. But they meet this big brute of a butler when they first arrive, just like in the Rocky Horror Picture Show. You know, they're a married couple, much like in the Rocky Horror Picture Show. And and then they meet like this sort of kind of effeminate master of the house, Horace Femme. His name is literally Femme. And it's just, I get very, very, very much Rocky Horror Picture vibes from a lot of that stuff.
Oh, yeah. But also, I mean, for me, also, like, I've thought of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, you know. I mean, that one goes a little bit darker, but it's still, you're stranded out in the middle of nowhere and you meet this crazy family and, you know, nightmares ensue. Although this one, like, again, it's based off of a novel. And apparently, I was going to try to read the novel, but apparently the novel is meant to be sort of like this satire on World War I, or not really more like a commentary on the after effects of society and class and men in particular after World War I. I didn't really get that from the movie, but that might not be the original story's fault. But you do kind of get the sense that this movie, at least with the dialogue, specifically the scene where they're all sitting around smoking and Lawton goes on this whole diatribe about money and all that stuff, that felt like they were supposed to be something socially or culturally biting or maybe revealing about that maybe I'm just too far removed to really kind of understand or contextualize the nuances of. But that felt like, okay, this was like, we're trying to do this like a, you know, like a novel, basically, where they just sit around and talk.
Yeah. I mean, I get the impression, for sure. I mean, like, the original novel probably did explore that World War I, you know, whatever, that ennui that was like very common after World War I, kind of the world over. But that, I also get the impression that the original novel was a straight horror novel. It seems like the plot was pretty similar. I looked it up, and the one thing that's different is in the book, Roger and Saul both die at the end. Roger does not survive.
Okay.
So they probably put that in there as just like a little happy ending for people.
Might have been universal. That might have been.
And I mean, it's also a comedy now, like, because they added all these comedic elements. Maybe it didn't fit the tone to have.
Do we really think this was designed to be a comedy? I mean, like,
I think
know
it
the
was,
whole
for
thing
sure.
about like the whole sin, and then it like jumps these weird cuts to reflections of her and this kind of warped reflection. I get the sense that it was meant to be a little bit off-putting, and maybe it's just comedic to us now.
I think it's a tone issue. Like, I have a feeling that James Whale might not have been a comedy director, and this is definitely a comedy script. So there's things in it that, like, how it was handled shows it as a comedy, but then, like, performances, like I said, they were totally straight performances. And, like here's an example. Shaun of the Dead. That's a modern film. The horror in that film is never really not scary. Like, they don't make it a bit that they're zombies outside of the, like, when the threat is there, the threat's really there. And most of the comedy comes from just how goofy the people are, and the fact that they kind of are coming to that with like a more modern, like, deconstructivist, like, view of horror films, as opposed to like people who would be in a horror film. But in this one, it's like the tone was so straightforward, and it also had all that melodrama in there too. So it's like, there was a lot of stuff from that time period, and it's like, well, this is all kind of heavy, and it really messed with the tone and like the shift of tone, because it was hard to figure out like what's happening in the movie. Like, are we being funny right now? Are we being serious right now?
I didn't have that problem with it. Yeah, I thought this movie was meant to be funny, and often was very funny. Like, I don't think that it. I didn't get tone whiplash.
I guess I tried. I guess I got it in my. I put my blinders on and like was buckling up for, you know, a kind of a scary monster movie, and it kind of was, but not really. I mean, Morgan. I will say I do like it when in horror movies when the menace isn't driven by anything supernatural. I always love that. Yeah. You know, that's fun for me. But I tried to watch it more as like a straight kind of horror movie as much as I can watch it, you know, almost a century later. Like it still kind of like gives you kind of creepier vibes. It's at least scarier than Curse of the Cat People. I'll say that. Well, yeah. You know, at least
it's definitely a horror comedy.
Okay. Yeah. Well, all right. I guess I just didn't pick up on the comedy vibes. Definitely picked up on the melodrama vibes, and that was maybe more of where I was just getting like the kind of quippy dialogue.
I got the vibe that this was supposed to be fucking ridiculous. Like, these people were supposed to be absurd and over the top, and like, I don't know, man. Yeah, just, and a lot of the dialogue like between the characters was so like silly and pithy, and like, I don't know. I just feel like it was, you know, she fucking keeps messing up her goddamn shoes like an idiot. Like, I just feel like it was meant to be a comedy for me.
The old lady being hard of hearing was very funny. I definitely, like, that one I got all the time because I'm also hard of hearing, so I have those conversations constantly now.
I mean, now that I'm thinking about it, Horse Fem's hilarious. You know, where he gets up there and he's so like, we don't need the lamp, do we? We can live in the dark.
Exactly.
We'll be fine. You know, he's just like your classic.
He's over the top, and he's like coward. Yeah, his sister like kind of rules over him in this way, but they have like these minor clashes of him being an atheist, and she's like, it's this awkward ass dinner scene.
Yeah, with the potato. You know, if it's British cuisine, that's at least the best part.
But the other thing that this movie probably introduced that I don't doubt was present in the novel, or at least from my perspective, you guys can give me your own feelings on this. One of the, you know, there's several ways they say you can like read a movie. You can do like Marxist reads, you could do whatever, literal reads, whatever. One of them is queer reads, and this movie is gay as hell. Like, James Whale was an openly gay man, but like Morgan and Saul seem like they have this weird relationship. The old man who's played by a woman, Roger at the beginning is like this weird confirmed bachelor who's like going along on this honeymoon with his husband and wife. And I think even the guy who shows up later, the businessman, has this whole monologue about like, no, the guy who's platonic friends with Gladys.
That's Charles Lawton.
Oh, is that Charles
Yeah,
Lawton?
That's Charles Lawton.
Oh, I mixed up
William
Lawton.
Porterhouse.
Yeah,
Porterhouse has this whole speech about how, like, he's not in a romantic relationship with this woman, and then he has this big speech about how society, like, looks down on him, and add in those Rocky Horror Picture vibes. Like, and Horace Femme, come on, like, it's so... Yeah, well, I think
that's an easy one.
With Porterhouse, it was very easy to imagine that was them talking about like a beard relationship, where the lady was there to kind of cover for what his actual circumstance was.
For what it's worth, there were rumors about Charles Lawton about that too. Nothing's been confirmed, but it's been rumored about quite a bit.
I mean, it's interesting. I didn't really pick up on, other than that, what other things, like, how do you guys feel about that? How do you feel that it was like, more
because
open about
that? I did a little bit of reading into that a little bit, just because most people, when it comes to James Whale, as far as queer reading of his movies, would always cite The Bride of Frankenstein. That's what they cite as his sort of like masterpiece. A lot of Whale's friends and biographers have sort of pushed back on that it wasn't that conscious about it. He was really just trying to make a horror movie. He was open about it, but he wasn't. They play it back a little bit. At least his people who knew him and his biographers sort of pushed back on that reading of his films, that he wasn't trying to be that subtle about it. So I don't know, man. I get it, but that just comes from Whale himself. I don't think he could help it. You know, like, maybe I think you can kind of read that both ways. That, like, did he intend to? Maybe not, but it's still, you can still see it. So does something intentionally in a film make that theory valid, or the fact that we are reading that in the film make the theory valid? That's why I'm kind of always iffy about films, especially from this era, because everything's very kind of, especially when you're in between the wars. You know, when you're in between World War I and World War II, culture around the planet was in this really kind of cool and groovy upheaval, but everything was very kind of heavy and dark and stuff. And it's I don't know, man. I kind of get the read, but then it's just all about, like, then it just ends with a happily ever after. They get married after meeting for 12 hours. You know?
Sure, but I mean, like, I don't know. It just seems like there's so many opportunities where it seems like there's implications, and knowing, like, in real life Whale was gay, and also knowing, like, how overt could you possibly be with that in a movie of this time? Probably about this overt.
Yes. Yeah. But that's what I'm saying, is that, like, is that Whale doing it, or is that us, the viewer, connecting those dots for ourselves? Like, that's we'll never really know, because, like I said, there's some dispute about how much worldview Whale put in his films. There's some debate about it. But since we're talking about the man,
I was going to say, this is where we could probably get into it, because somebody on the show did a lot of work hard this weekend. They watched all the stuff they could about this. So I'm all for hearing about that.
Yeah, because I think it's fair to say that this movie was almost lost, because Universal lost the private, and then it went to William Castle,
rediscovered at a certain point.
Yeah, it was rediscovered, but most people know the title of this movie from the 1963 movie, which I did not watch, Chris did not watch, but our old pal Zach watched.
Yeah, the 1963 movie is quite different. Some of the character names are the same. It's still the Femme family, and the main character is named Roger Penderell or whatever. But he's like this car salesman, right? Who is selling Casper Femme a car. And Casper is like, "You're my only friend. I'm inviting you over to my house tonight. Please come. Please take the car with you and deliver it to my house." So he goes to the house, and he discovers Casper has died when he last saw him. So Casper's corpse is sitting in the living room. And he meets, like, the 5 or 6 other members of this family, right? Who are all, like, weird, kooky characters. Basically, over the course of the night, members of the family are getting bumped off, like they're dying. And it's revealed there's a huge inheritance that will go to whoever the final surviving member of the family is. And also there's this weird rule that the family has to be present in the house every night at midnight, or they get cut out of the inheritance. So they all have to live in this house or they're going to lose their money. But anyway, so it's like plays like this weird murder mystery. Who's doing it? Who's killing these people? But it's super goofy and slapstick. Like very, very, very silly. There's like a trap door that he keeps falling down, and like they break a little vase over. Like the big buff, like one of the uncles is like a huge Morgan-esque dude, and there's this woman that's like keeps on coming on to him like aggressively as one of the femmes, and it's like the main actor sounds like Jimmy Stewart but doesn't look like him. Well, one of them like has one of the characters. Each of the characters is a quirk. One of them thinks that the flood from the Bible is going to happen again, and has literally built an ark in the backyard that's full of fucking animals.
Weird.
So,
oh my god,
that's a lot of stuff happening.
That is definitely not this movie.
It's quite different. It shares a few names, and this guy's stuck in an old dark house, but like otherwise it's quite different in what it's about.
So basically, they borrowed the name and nothing else, kind of.
Yeah,
and the Femme family, I guess. Okay, because like even
the protagonist has the same name.
It's funny that the remake happened, because I honestly, when I was trying to figure out what I was going to pick for this theme, one of the other movies that stuck out to me that I was looking at, again purely based on the casting pedigree, was a 1949 movie called You'll Find Out, and it's essentially the same plot that you just described. It's more of a comedy. It's this artist in the 1940s, Kay Kaiser and his band, like are performing for a birthday bash at some spooky heiress's family. It's got Bela Lugosi, Peter Lorre, Boris Karloff, and it's more of a comedy musical horror movie. So I was this close to choosing that one. So I mean, either way, somebody's getting trapped in a house. Am I right?
Sure.
But
Classic
also, I mean,
singers.
Zach did a step above, because we were in our Slack chats. We were talking about the director James Whale, because I had first heard of James Whale not just from watching the old Universal movies when I was very much a wee one, but then I remember watching the movie Gods and Monsters, which Ian McKellen played James Whale, which took place in like the 50s, directed by Condon. And I don't really have a strong memory of that film. I remember kind of liking it, but I remember I think I saw it in like middle school, so I didn't really understand it, because I think it was right around the time that Ian McKellen was playing Magneto, and I wasn't really familiar with Ian McKellen, but I was very familiar with Magneto. So I was like, well, I better get familiar with Ian McKellen. So Gods and Monsters was the first movie I watched with McKellen. Like, well, he's an actor, so. But Zach did recently rewatch Gods and Monsters, and
I'd never seen it before. Yeah.
Really, you had never seen it? Oh, okay.
Nope.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's Ian McKellen and guy who's having a big comeback right now, Brendan Fraser.
Brendan Fraser.
Yeah, everybody loves Brendan Fraser. Got a sterling reputation. Anyway, yeah, it's really about the final months, I guess, of James Whale's life. It's a somewhat fictionalized account. The character that Brendan Fraser plays is kind of analogous from maybe a person who lived with Whale, but is not directly real. He plays a gardener that begins to work for Whale, who Whale has becomes fascinated by, and it's unclear how much that's sexual and how much it's not. The end of the movie implies he just wanted a friend because he was like a lonely old man. But basically, yeah, it's about James Whale. Like, he'd been long out of the film business by this point. He like retired after a certain point when one of his big passion projects, which was about like the rise of fascism in Europe in like the 30s, he made this movie, was a flop, partially because of studio meddling, and he retires, and he was retired for years and years and years. And it's just about him assessing his career and also dealing with the fact that he's slowly like losing memories, like he has dementia, and dealing with his memories of World War I, which James Whale did really serve in World War I. He saw frontline action. He was a prisoner of war. So sort of dealing with like these traumatic memories. The best scene in the movie is McKellen giving this monologue about this friend he had in World War I who dies in no man's land about 50 yards into no man's land and is strung up on barbed wire. and how eventually they couldn't get him. It was too far out. So he and all the other soldiers, even though this was a guy he deeply cared for and implied possibly even had a romantic relationship with, would just start greeting him every morning like, "Hi, Bertram. Hello, Bertram. We don't know how long he was there, but when the next crew came, we introduced him and spoke highly of his companionship," and like how they have to like disassociate themselves from. It's the best. It's clearly the best scene in the movie. Yeah. One weird moment. James Whale did die by suicide because of his dementia. He drowned himself in his pool. But the night before he dies, he attempts to they have Whale physically assault Brendan Fraser's character, and the implication is he's trying to make him so angry that he'll kill him, and he doesn't. Like, it's suicide by homophobia is the implication. But it's very strange because when you're making a story about a real guy, inventing a scene where he sexually assaults somebody is very strange to me. And B, Brendan Fraser is famously a survivor of sexual assault. Like, that was part of why he stepped down from his career for a long time. So that aspect did age weirdly. Overall, I think it's a very strong movie. It's free on HBO. As far as the making of things like The Old Dark House, it's not super interested in like the parts of James Whale's life where he was making movies.
It flashes back very, very
shortly, to like the set of The Bride of Frankenstein.
I'm pretty sure that like my one memory from that movie is that James Whale's character just keeps saying how boring Boris Karloff was in real life.
Yeah,
he's like, that was the most boring man I ever met. Which I'm like, okay, well that's dishing quite a bit in this docudrama.
Right. And Gloria Stewart doesn't have a lot of kind things to say about Karloff either.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I kind of always, my memory of that movie, I kind of wondered how much of the Brendan Fraser character was like legitimately trying to be someone, or how much of that was like trying to be like an author insert character, because the author wanted to have conversations with James Whale and things like that, and they just needed to have some sort of an ending to kind of button in the fact that James Whale was gay, but he deserved to be, thought of as a person. So making the homophobia and the death by homophobia more of an overt question was probably their way of trying to deal with the fact that at the time, him being gay was like a huge question and a huge issue. So him like being a person who should, be able to live his life and enjoy who he was important. I don't know. It was weird because it came out during that time period in the 90s where there were a lot of issue films involving like someone being gay as the main, oh my God, crux of the film, as opposed to later films where it's like someone just happens to be gay and it's not as much of an issue. At least that was my read on it.
I mean, like I said, I barely remember the movie, but I do remember the James Whale kind of hint. They don't actually say that he's gay, but they very strongly hint at it. That's what I remember of it. And according to the IMDb page, that like this was apparently Karloff and Whale had a dalliance, and this was kind of the movie that kind of broke them up, because Whale was kind of famous for sort of punishing Karloff in weird ways, like making him do takes over and over again just to like manifest his outrage or petty jealousy or whatever. That's at least what I heard, but for the most part, everybody just hated shooting in the rain in this movie. Especially they just hated that bit.
Well,
and I will say, like, there's a scene in the very opening of the movie. This is I gotta hand it to Whale, because Whale was very much inspired by German expressionism, from almost 5 or 6 years earlier, and as a lot of horror movie directors were at that in the 30s. So he's not afraid to move the camera, and especially this movie, considering it's very Priestley, where it's drawing room, everyone's sitting around talking. He does block it like a stage play, but he knows how to move the camera, and he knows where to put the camera. He's very deliberate about that, and I kind of like that. There's that opening shot, 2 moments in the opening scene. One was the rock slide, which I felt was pretty impressive in 1932, because you knew they had to do that shit live, and I thought it looked pretty good. And then there's when they first come up to the house, you could tell Whale just put a fucking camera right on the car, and just like drove the car up there. And I thought that was a pretty bold choice for 1932,
especially
for
for
a
how much
studio film,
especially for how heavy those cameras used to be.
For
That
sure.
wasn't a small,
and how
wasn't a
shitty
small
those cars were
undertaking.
back then.
Yeah,
Am
yeah,
I
yeah.
right? You know.
Yeah.
I also think one of the things about possibly the idea that there is material in the old dark house that's a little progressive for its time, or a little bit interesting or unusual, like some of the gay readings possibly, or, you know, possibly the metaphor of like being secluded or abandoned or looked down on by society for sexual orientation, things like that. The thing I think that's worth noting about that is Whale in his filmography is clearly political and clearly progressive overtly. Like Showboat is about racial prejudice, like full stop. And that movie I mentioned, The Road Back, which was changed from Whale's original vision by studio interference, like it was banned in Nazi Germany. And like Whale wanted it to make it much more of like an open, like Nazis suck ass movie than the studio was willing to do in the 1930s. So I don't think it's that, I don't know. I think Whale is a director who, beyond just making like a little spook house movie, would probably have a little bit more on his mind than just, you know, here's Karloff chasing a girl.
I agree, especially like I said, the fact that the novel itself, the source material, is sort of a, you know, a commentary on post World War I society. I can imagine Whale latching onto that and trying to get into deeper themes, and almost kind of does. Like I said, maybe I just didn't get it, and I'm not sophisticated enough to understand it, which wouldn't surprise me in the slightest. But I'll go ahead and give you a point for that, Zach, because you're completely right. I think that Whale was aware of what he was trying to say in his movies. I just where the biographers push back is that how overt he was being with the whole homosexual stuff. They would argue that he wasn't as overt about it as, especially the Gods and Monsters movie made it out to be, and as, you know, but as film academics like to read into his movies, especially not so much this, but definitely Bride of Frankenstein. Bride of Frankenstein, and as I remember, that's mostly what the movie covers in Gods and Monsters, is him making Bride of Frankenstein. I think
that's the movie they jump back to flashbacks of.
If I remember correctly, that's what they harken back to out of all of his films. That's the one that sticks out to me, if I remember the movie correctly. So I'll give you a point for that, Stack. That I think that it could be likely, but I don't know. Considering that people knew him, pushed back on it, I kind of take
they do argue in Gods and Monsters, like they cut to him making Bride of Frankenstein a flashback, and he very overtly tells the actor who plays, I think the character's name is Dr. Pistorius or something like that.
Dr. Praetorius.
Who I believe the actor was gay also in real life.
Yes.
He's very overt, like, you are in love with Dr. Frankenstein. Like, he's telling him on set. And obviously, like, did that happen? We don't know. Maybe.
Right.
But,
I mean, I don't know if anybody would have been that open with saying it that way, just because of the time period. But having thought about this, the trope of going to an old house, like the old dark house, because there's rain outside and you're trying to find a place for safety and things like that, that was a super common trope. So I wonder if like this was something he knew he was doing a spoof or like a take on it, like if it wasn't like a genre, like since then we think of that genre as like, oh god, there's so many things of people coming up and seeing that, but we don't really associate stories before this time period with that. So for, I think a lot of people, we kind of think of this as maybe one of the first, like, people go to a creepy old house.
Possibly it could be the first filmed example of that. I'm not entirely sure.
I'm not sure. I'm just wondering if, like, because there was like radio plays and things like that, and like the Alfred Hitchcock hour and things like that. Going back, if this might have been something people knew about, so then seeing this, it was like, oh well, it's a spoof, but we also know where it's based off.
I mean, it's a classic dramatic trope. I mean, they've been doing it on stage forever. Like Priestley was a dramatist. That's why this movie is what it is. And whether Whale was leaning into the more goofy, because as I'm rethinking about it now, you know, like when they're first driving in the car and then they cut to a real close up of water leaking in through the ceiling and dripping onto Massey's head. I think that maybe that was meant to be funnier than I took it.
And I think that there's little thing like when he goes upstairs and he gets that lamp from right next to the door that's all bolted and there's like food there. That lamp is fucking ridiculous. It's so big. It's like, I feel like that has to be a joke. I've never seen a lamp that looks like that. It's massive.
It's gigantic. It also, like, it's cool considering the time period, the 1930s, because, you know, there aren't a lot of fades in this movie, so most of the things are in camera. And the sound effects in that era are so obviously a guy in the background.
Yeah.
I love, you know, that for a film academic, if that's the academic stuff that I get out of it. I'm like, wow, that you know, that shit's live, honey. They're see, hear that lightning strike? There's somebody off in the camera. That would have been my fucking job. Would be there just
yeah, that was like classic like radio sound effects playing in
totally.
the background.
Yeah,
no later loop sounds. It's all like live recording. Yeah,
right. Yeah. So it was a whole new thing for film because like film was so used to just being, you know, silent and stuff. So when they realized that, oh wait, we got to put music. Well, there's only one way to put music in this film, buddy. And that's it's cool. That's why you like these kind of movies. And also, it is cool to see how early a lot of these, especially the actors, their career was. I mean, Karloff just got started. Charles Lawton was just getting. I mean, all of these people were just kind of getting. I think Gloria Stewart was the one, like, kind of well-tread journeyman at that point, as far as films are concerned. Because Charles Lawton, I don't think, was in many films before that. But it is a great cast.
Yeah.
By everyone except Karloff. There, I said it. Karloff's overrated.
He does what Karloff does, which is be a big hulking monster,
which is just
who chases someone around a little bit.
Well, he was playing Frankenstein again.
Yeah, I know. That's
Frankenstein. But the difference is the original time he played Frankenstein, they had enough like little lyrical moments, little polite moments, little sweet moments where you saw the humanity of the character. In this one, the most humanity I think we see is when he's like, oh, that guy's dead. Oh, that guy's really dead. I feel bad. Other than that, it's like, oh man, your uncle got a little drunk and he's really, really angry about this hockey match is basically how it played for me most of the time.
It's so weird. And that's the other thing, like this Morgan character, like, so they're very much like, oh, Morgan gets wildly drunk and like is dangerous. They have to keep him around because he's like the only person who Saul will engage with, and vice versa. Like, it's a very interesting little dynamic they have.
Yeah, and it's funny that they make Morgan always go after the women too, because the sister brings that up, that like he's terribly lecherous, and you know, they sort of imply a bit of a rape might be in store if Morgan had his way. Sort of imply that, but they sort of imply that the whole family's sort of into that, and
yeah,
Dad,
she says everybody's
Dad
lustful
did nothing,
and sinful.
Dad did nothing to dissuade that, other than just saying that Saul's the real dangerous one. I'm just this old man.
Yeah, it's a classic. It's a classic thing of like families in isolation get weird. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Why? That's the other thing. Like, what was your guys' impression of when the father character shows up and it's very clearly a young woman in old age makeup who sounds like a young woman playing this 102-year-old bedridden man,
doing an impression of a 102 bedridden man. I was once an old man. You know, like it's
such an interesting choice to just make that character. It is an
interesting choice, but it's also like I'll bet at the time nobody gave a shit. I'll bet everyone was all like, oh, fucking old man there. I mean,
this happens in modern times too, where there'll be a strange gender swap that just leaves you wondering, like, I'm not against it, but I don't know why. Like the movie Suspiria, like famously had like Tilda Swinton playing a man,
like 5 different characters.
Yeah, and I was totally like,
they did that in the HBO Angels in America with I think it was it Glenn Close?
No, Meryl Streep.
Probably. I mean, the thing is, it's like totally acceptable when it happens. Like, oh, okay, they just gender swap that character. But I don't know what the.
I mean,
I'd say those examples
on Broadway was played by a woman forever, and nobody gave a shit.
Yeah.
But I think those examples are different because in both of those examples, A, it's a single actor playing multiple parts throughout a show, and B, it's often the most famous actor there is. What was your first example? Besides, I said Angels in America. You said the other gender swapped one.
He said Suspiria.
Suspiria.
Oh, right. Suspiria, that's a remake, but very strange. Yeah, like Tilda Swinton.
Hairspray. Hairspray is another example. Where
those ones are all well, also, let's do Angels in America and Hairspray.
Right, yeah.
Both
John
based
Waters.
on plays. Yeah. And also, I mean, if you want to talk about gay movies.
They are.
Yeah. And that's why I think that it's I don't know, it's an interesting choice, but not that surprising of a choice considering there probably weren't that many 102-year-old people to play that convincingly. But I don't buy that for a second. You're right. There must have been an old man you could have laid in bed and
or even a young on. I mean, it's very transparently, in my opinion, very clearly a woman. Like I'm sure they could have found a young man and aged him up, and it would have sounded more like a male voice.
For my read on it, I thought it just tried to add to the continuing eerie ambiance of the whole house, and that everything's sort of like really strange, and that's why I sort of enjoy the choice, and it works to add that sort of eerie effect that the movie still kind of had throughout it.
I think she was in a couple Mystery House movies. I don't think she was super young though.
Yeah, I think she was actually pretty up there at the time of this movie.
Yeah, Elspeth something.
She was born 1871, and this movie came out in 1932.
Okay, so she was 60, maybe?
Yeah,
around 60 years old.
She definitely wasn't like an octogenarian or anything, but she was, a little bit older.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think she had a little bit of a history doing spooky, people go into old house movies too. There's something called there's a thing in here called Mystery House that it looks like it's a similar deal to this.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's why, but other than that, what a great cast, though, this movie had. Other than Karloff, I really like Charles Lawton's.
Sure, I think everybody's great.
Charles Lawton is so committed to playing this character who's just more or less a caricature. But he brings such humanity to it, and what a joy that must be as another actor to play off of, to see this kind of larger man, but just like graceful and just like kind of goofy, but like, he's Mercury. He's liquid metal. It's very cool.
That character when he first shows up is like kind of an oaf and a little boorish, and
but even Melvin Douglas
and they're even making fun of the Welsh throughout this movie at the beginning. Like they're mocking the Welsh, and then that guy shows up and he's Welsh, and he's kind of a
but even Pendrell, Roger Pendrell, the Melvin Douglas character, even you meet him and he's just like your typical what you would picture a 1930s bachelor to be like, where he's just kind of lazing about, let's get some brandy in me, that kind of guy. And I thought now I will say the love story was extremely rushed, and I get why that was the case. I
think that seemed a little tacked on.
Yeah, right. But it added an interesting enough thrust, and William Bond's fine. But I was really impressed with the cast.
It's a pretty common.
Even the femme brother and sister.
It's a pretty common second act like fix up. They were like, it's getting slow in the second act. We've got to have these characters do something. Let's add a romance B plot plop.
Off to the honeymoon you go, kids. Roll credits.
I think that I agree. I liked all the performances. I thought that all of the femmes were so camp that it was really enjoyable to see like these broad caricatures, like even when they finally get around to Saul, who like first he's got like his arm is around the corner for like 3 minutes straight, and it's just like, oh shit, Saul's coming. And then like Morgan gets taken care of and Saul shows up, and he is just a kindly looking old man. And they really I like that scene a lot, where like Saul tries to like gaslight Penderell by being like, they're crazy, they locked me up for no reason.
No, it's a fun turn as an audience member too, because you're almost like, well, that makes sense.
And then
I
he
buy
just
that.
slowly begins to advance on him and plays with the knife. I think it's a really well done little sequence where like Saul, you kind of believe him at first, and then gradually he becomes a little more unsettling and dangerous seeming until the facade falls away completely.
Right, and then it just becomes Harpo Marx setting the building on fire.
We talked about Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I think. This one the second Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I think, borrows from this one even more. Because the second one is the one that's
more
actually
of a comedy.
Just comedy, yeah.
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 But, I mean, there's still some spooky, eerie themes going on in this movie. I mean, it's still pushing the kind of creepy level a bit. Like, it is... I understand the camp and stuff, but I mean, there are some pretty off-putting moments in this movie, and maybe it's just because of Curse of the Cat People, where I was just looking for anything to even remotely spook me. And this one at least kind of accomplished that goal, where it is not. You're right. It is more of a horror comedy. It's more of a horror movie.
I think the comedy is very intentional based on what I looked at Rotten Tomatoes to see like reviews from people, and almost every single one of them is on the page. This is a horror comedy.
Right. Well, and it should be noted too that this film was almost lost, like I said, because of the 63 one, and nobody had seen this, but then they found some print sitting in, I don't know, some country or whatever, and they were able to restore it, and that's how they were able to preserve this movie.
I'm glad they did. I think this movie's pretty fun.
Yeah, everyone thought that this was like a forgotten James Whale classic, and it'd be hard to believe with a movie with everybody who's in this movie, and considering this is the second pairing with Whale and Karloff, because Frankenstein was such a big deal. I think this film underscores that point, is that Frankenstein was such a lightning rod for movies that
is that pun intended?
Yeah, there you go. It's alive. So I that movie very much this movie seems to be sort of Whale and Karloff, and like, we'll just piggyback off of that. I got another one. Let's go.
I hadn't actually seen the whole movie either until we did this, because it was like, when you said it was like an undiscovered or rediscovered like lost film, I remember in Denver, they had found the nitrate film, and I went to that one transfer house. I told you guys about it. The only part of this movie I saw was essentially them showing up and then entering the house. Like, that's all they played for us, was that first chunk of that reel where they're in the vehicle, and then they show up at the house, and then they go in. So for me, I was just like, oh, okay, it's a scary movie. But the guy who was showing it to us was like, yeah, this is a lost film, but this one isn't super popular. And he just kind of kept letting us know that. And then he played it. I'm like, okay, well, my anticipation's really low now. But yeah.
We found this old classic film, and boy, does it suck. So here you go.
It's a real piece of shit for you today.
That was basically it. That was his whole read on it.
That's funny.
I mean, this is historically important, I guess, but otherwise it has no redeeming value.
It's like, here's the nice.
The world would have honestly been better if they had been lost.
I found a nice chunk of corporalite to show you off to you today. Yeah,
that
is good. So I guess we can get to final thoughts, unless you guys have more to harp on.
I'll give you. I think for your notes about like how strong the cast was, even though Karloff is kind of just doing his Karloff shtick.
Yeah,
I'll give you a point for that observation.
All right, thank you, buddy.
I think that's well observed. It's true.
Yeah, because I mean, he got. Because Frankenstein was such a big deal, like, I think that's what they're just like, kind of, I don't know. I don't get it with Karloff. Lugosi, I get it, but not with Karloff.
Lugosi, he's I like Lugosi a lot better. Dracula's a really good performance, and Ed Wood, his portrayal of Ed Wood is a lot of very interesting.
Well,
very true. And Ed Wood himself is an interesting character.
Have you seen Boris Karloff in The Mummy?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. A long time ago.
I was wondering,
and that is probably his most unique performance.
Yeah, because I was thinking, I vaguely remember that one having more going on with the acting, but I didn't know exactly.
I mean, he gets to talk.
Yeah, sure. Use words. I mean, there's nothing to say he's not talking in the old dark house. You just can't understand what the fuck he's saying. Which, by the way, I mean, not for nothing, in Frankenstein the book, Frankenstein does talk. Quite loquaciously, if I may add. Like, it sounds just like Dr. Frankenstein.
Right.
Anyway,
Karloff,
so I guess
I'll give Karloff credit. Like, There are scenes in the Frankenstein movies where I think he's good. Like the scene with the little girl, I think he does well. There's a scene where he meets an old blind man and he's like trying to smoke and he does it so rapidly, and it's a pretty fun little bit.
Part of what he does so well in Frankenstein is he has this sheen of a victim still, you know, and
Morgan's kind of a watered down, he's just a brute, more or
right.
less.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's nothing sympathetic and there's not supposed to be. And that's why I think Karloff hated this movie. So, and it shows. All right. Well, I guess we've toured the old dark house on all of its secret corridors and its lunatic family members. Zach, why don't you go ahead and give your final thoughts, since you're going to announce the next film? Then I'll give mine. Then we'll get to Boris. Then we'll give mine.
Okay. Yeah. So the old dark house was one that I ended up quite a bit. I enjoyed this movie. I might have enjoyed it more than either of you two. I found it genuinely pretty funny. In a very like reserved way, that like the remake was like so silly and slapstick and just didn't work for me. But this one was like so, I don't know. One of the reviews called it like almost a drawing room farce, and it's like, yeah, it's like that level. It's like not, it's not silly Three Stooges shit, but it's these absurd characters and this absurd intersection of society and people excluded from society, and it's I really enjoyed it on that level. I think that there are a lot of ways to look at this movie. You could draw, I mean, we came away with certain different ideas about what it was about, but I don't know, I think it has a little more going on than meets the eye, and overall I had a good time with the old dark house.
Alrighty. Chris Boris, do you have any final thoughts about the dank?
My feeling on the movie was that it was fine. I didn't really, it didn't like, my feelings on the movie is that basically it had a lot of interesting parts, but I'm not sure what of this will actually stick with me later for having watched it. I think it was more of an interesting thing on an academic level. Charles Lawton's fun. It's worth it to see it once if you're just kind of wanting to be more familiar with that time period and all that. But I mean, there's better films from all the people involved. That's what I'll say.
Okay, that's fair.
I think I'm kind of right in between I'm leaning more towards Boris' view of this movie. I think I wanted to like this movie more than I actually did. I'm not sure if it's just because I wholly missed the comedy parts of it, and the lighthearted sort of ending sort of threw me off, where I was like, well, then nothing fucking matters, I guess. We'll just, and I think that the films that this film might have inspired, I think I liked a little bit better. So maybe I just have the privilege of living in the future. That being said, it was an enjoyable movie. I mean, it was fun. It was tight, not a lot of nonsense. It really, like, what you love about movies in this era, you're in and out, they're real quick. And the characters are very well fleshed out, and not just, you don't necessarily get a sense of who they are personally, but you get a sense of how they relate to one another, and where they stand with one another. And that's always a fun dynamic to play with. Sure. And as I've mentioned earlier, I always love it when a horror movie, part of why I thought this movie was going to be better than what it was. I thought it was going to be more like Frankenstein, Invisible Man, but like, rather than add in some, magic super science or whatever, it's just a crazy family, and I wanted to see what that was like in 1930. And, I wasn't terribly disappointed, but it strayed more into the goofy side, which I guess I wasn't really prepared. And that's maybe more my fault. So yeah, I guess that's my final thoughts of the film. I'm sort of with more of an academic view for me, where, before and after, many people made better movies with everybody involved. But it was nice to see that everybody got together to make this film and that it still exists. And I got to see it and have Karloff basically play Frankenstein with only, a quarter of the makeup. So yeah, I guess, so I'm excited to, maybe Zach will actually pick an actual like spooky, scary movie from this era, because like there's still some good there's still some grapes on the vine that we haven't really plucked at yet. But before we get to Zach's point, let's get our business done. Let's read the will of the family. Chris Boris, you still have 2 bonus points and are at 11 points. I now have 11 points to give out with 1 more bonus point to give out because Zach gave me a point for applauding all the cast and taking a piss at Karloff's Cheerios a little bit. And Zach, you have 2 more bonus points to give out with 12 points because I gave you a bonus point for chasing the whale, so to speak. So with that in mind, Zach Powers in the final movie of our 2nd annual Halloween theme, which in our 2nd one, we've covered now the whole era between. So, Zach Powers, what are we doing?
Yeah, this was an interesting choice to make. Like, there are a lot. Like, I made a list. I sent it to you guys of like dozens of movies from this area. Like, I had considered. I mean, do I go back to the silent era and like take a gamble on Nosferatu or Caligari or something? Do I go to the classic Universal movies? But I feel like James Whale, we like kind of went there a little bit. We were in the neighborhood with the old Dark House. I briefly was like, well, we watched Charles Lawton in this. I could do Night of the Hunter because he would go on to direct that. Be a pretty big shoe-in, I imagine, because that's kind of a classic. But I felt like I wanted to do something I hadn't seen before. And so I looked at my list and I was like, well, what's something that feels unique, feels different from the movies we've watched so far? And the one that stood out to me was 1955's Diabolique, which I've never seen. It's a French horror film from 1955, so I'm adding foreign onto the old. I don't know if either of you have seen it, but it intrigued me.
I have. You're actually doing a callback right now. Diabolique, I believe, is directed by the same director who did the original Wages of Fear.
Correct.
Yes.
Correct.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah.
And it's his wife, right? His wife is the main character, isn't it?
I believe so, yes. Yes, when we watch it, keep in mind that the fish shown were real fish, and they were really in the state that they are describing them in the movie.
Well, that's
ominous.
Yeah, that is ominous.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, this will be a blind from me. I guess
that's a wild card.
Based on Chris's response so far, I'm guessing that at the very least this will succeed in being something like a horror movie.
It has been classically reviewed, classically talked about. It's exciting you're going to see this, and I think it's
French New Wave, baby. We're doing it.
Yeah, it's also going to lead to an interesting conversation about the treatment of actors.
Okay.
We didn't do that with Peckinpah?
Or Kubrick. Come on.
Yeah, right.
You guys will see. You guys will see.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Alrighty. Well, that will next time we'll join us, please, for 1955's Diabolique. It'll be the conclusion of our spooky Halloween spectacular. So we'll be voting and we'll decide who will get to inflict us with a movie of their choice. And then after that, we'll jump into my theme with the sports and the hockey and the whatnot. So with that in mind, thank you very much for joining us. I hope you have a spooky good time. I've been Russell Carlson. This has been The Movie Trap, and I have been joined by Chris Boris.
Spook you later.
And also Zach Powers.
It's only a bit of gin, you know.
All righty. And don't forget, as we say here on The Movie Trap, Diane Ladd is too young to play Chevy Chase's mom.
That's the Movie Trap
promise. Have a potato,
promise.
everybody. Have a potato.
We're adding a new catchphrase. Have a potato.
There you go. I don't know why they kept serving it. Have a potato. See ya.
It's a dreadful night. What?